Alright guys, full disclosure, I am not very qualified to review this game. It's a fairly deep action RPG, and RPGs are usually not my thing. But because I'm trying to get more into the genre, I'm reviewing it anyway. When Demon's Souls first came out in 2009, exclusively on the PlayStation 3, there really wasn't, as far as I can tell, anything quite like it on the North American market. While it is a deep RPG in terms of the leveling up system, your equipment and items and so forth, when it comes to the actual gameplay, it feels way more like an old school action-adventure game. The levels are pretty darn linear. I mean, some are kinda maze-like and there are secrets and such to discover, but there's no sprawling open world to be found here. Really the only goal is to reach the end of each stage without dying, and then defeat a boss. Simple, right? Yeah, when anyone discusses this game or any of its successors, the first thing that's typically mentioned is the brutal difficulty. And it is very difficult. You might think that that would make it a bad game for an inexperienced RPG player, but because the core gameplay reminded me so much of those hard-as-nails action-adventure games from the earlier ages of gaming that I'm a fan of, I mostly felt at home with Demon's Souls, and found it to be a decent entry point into the world of action RPGs. That said, you cannot play Demon's Souls like a traditional action-adventure game or hack-and-slash, and if you try to, it will humble you in a hurry. The control scheme is very unique, and you have to be very meticulous in your actions. You use the right shoulder buttons to deal out either a light attack or a heavy attack, which deals more damage but is much slower. The left shoulder buttons control your shield, L1 blocks and L2 does what's called a parry. Basically a heavy thrust into an enemy, which, if timed correctly, leaves them wide open for a fatality. I find it difficult to pull off though, and it seems to be more of an advanced strategy. I quickly eased myself into the habit of just keeping my shield up at almost all times, especially when around enemies or when venturing into uncharted territory. This type of cautious playstyle seemed to me to be the best path to take as a noob, because every enemy in this game is a serious threat to kill you. There are no Goombas in Boletaria. This unique control scheme feels clunky at first, but if you're patient and stick with it, you'll learn that it isn't actually. There's so much weight to your character and their movements, for realism's sake, and the number one most important aspect is timing. Once you get the hang of timing your blocks and attacks, the game is still very difficult, but it becomes clear that the controls aren't bad in any way. They just need to be learned. A pick-up-and-play game, this is not. At times I felt like I was entirely relearning how to play video games. Remember what I said about being meticulous in your actions? That's especially relevant when you consider the stamina bar. That's the green bar near the red health bar. Your stamina is drained every time you launch an attack, anytime you're sprinting, and anytime your shield absorbs a hit. If you run out of stamina, your character freezes and becomes a sitting duck until you regain your energy. Utilizing the lock-on system is also key. You'll get absolutely wrecked if you don't. However, this is one of the areas of the game that genuinely does lack polish. It can be a bit clumsy at times, particularly when it tries to switch targets on your behalf. Other bits of sloppiness in the game include quite a lot of graphical glitches, some of which do affect the gameplay and can lead to cheap deaths. It can also work to your benefit, like this enemy who flew into a building and got himself stuck. Dumb shit. Enemy AI can be a bit stupid all the way around, hitboxes can be inaccurate, and there are occasional flashes of PS1 era camera wonkiness. I do need to stress, though, that these issues don't crop up with nearly enough frequency to ruin the game, but they are frequent enough to warrant a mention. But anyway, yeah, the control scheme. It's very difficult to master. In all of my time with the game, I can't say that I came close to doing so. That's right, I'm not afraid to admit that I suck. When I look back on a lot of my deaths, what I should have done is often obvious when viewing the footage, but didn't occur to me in the heat of the game. Despite its relative slow pace when compared to other action-adventure games, time can really fly by when in the moment. Speaking as someone who has been playing games for most of their life, it was definitely a ride to just get utterly annihilated by the very first level when I first picked up the game. One minor mistake can completely sink you, and while it can be very frustrating, it's also very rewarding to make progress. There's also no difficulty setting on this game, which from what I gather is a hallmark of the series. I find that to be a good decision, as it gives the game a very specific, signature vibe. So what about the RPG elements? Well, to start, when creating your character you get to pick a class. Knight, soldier, barbarian, royalty, and so on. You get the idea. Each have their strengths and weaknesses. Now, these classes are merely a starting point, not set in stone. Once you begin playing, you can choose to level up whatever stats you want, whenever you want. That said, class does make a big difference early on. I initially went with the barbarian because I thought he looked the coolest, and because I like melee combat. I got thrashed using this guy. So I started a new game and chose Royalty, which starts you out with decent magic stats and the ability to use spells from the jump. Royalty is essentially the noob class. Having a projectile right from the beginning makes the level of difficulty a lot more manageable. The range of the attacks is limited though, which helps it avoid being too easy and taking the fun out of the game. Anyway, anytime you kill an enemy, you harvest their souls, and that acts as currency, not only to level up stats, but also to buy weapons and items and such. The game's big hook is that when you die, you lose all your souls. But if you can make it back to your place of dying on your next life and touch your bloodstain, you regain them. If not, those souls are gone forever, and the grind starts anew. All throughout my playthrough, I was wondering if I was making the right decisions with what to do with my souls. Like I said, I'm inexperienced with most types of RPGs. I often check out mentally when a game has these screens full of numbers and variables, so I really just had a wing it strategy when leveling up, and went with a sort of balanced approach. A lot of people seem to think that that's a bad idea since no stat is going to reach its full potential. Next time I play a Souls game, I'm definitely going to do more homework about the varying builds different players make. I do think this is a cool concept though, since it allows individuals to determine their own playstyles, and obviously adds a great deal of replayability. So like every other video ever made about a Souls game, this video has touched on the game's level of difficulty. Now let's talk about the game's level of forgiveness, because once I got a basic grip on the controls, I found that the actual gameplay isn't that hard. As someone who doesn't consider themselves to be very good at video games in general, the levels themselves are nothing that I can't plow my way through with some persistence and memorization. The game does show mercy in that anytime you die, you get to keep any and all weapons in your possession. However, that's about the only bone you're thrown, because there are no checkpoints in these levels. At all. Not even before the bosses. Now let me be perfectly clear. I don't have a single problem with the lack of checkpoints throughout levels, but having to go all the way back after being quickly killed by a boss is absolutely demoralizing. Shortcuts can be found in some levels, but that doesn't appear to be the norm, and the fact remains, you go back. For instance, this particular level features a shortcut, but I clocked it. It still takes an entire 2.5 minutes to get back to the boss. This is what I like to call artificial difficulty. It doesn't add to the challenge, it's just a chore. And whenever I was having trouble with a boss, it led to a very large portion of my time playing the game to be not actually playing, but rather completing the same tedious dash through a memorized path again and again. It was the single most frustrating aspect of the game for me. Repeated deaths on the boss fights made me want to rush, which leads to stupid deaths. And while running past enemies on the way to a boss can sometimes work, other times it is simply not an option. As if that's not enough, if you die too many times on a specific level, the game, unbelievably, throws in what are called Black Phantoms, which are extremely tough enemies that glow red. Some are just ridiculous. Look at how little damage I'm doing here, and he can kill me in one blow. This is next level punishment. Thankfully, the game is built around a hub area with 5 Arc Stones, which function as a stage select, similar to the Mega Man franchise. That's nice because if you're having trouble on a certain level, you can at least see another part of the game, and farm souls to level up your character and make them stronger. After spending some time in other stages and grinding out levels, I'd often find that the bosses I thought were tough before became not as bad. I guess this is the part where I have to admit that I didn't make it extremely far in this game. Frankly, I just don't have the discipline, and I'm not a big enough fan of this type of game to invest the necessary time to truly get good at it. I enjoyed my time with it, and at a certain point decided I had played enough to properly experience it and had gotten my money's worth, which was $3.50. Thanks, Goodwill. It's comparable to how I've treated some of the Need for Speed games in the past, when the computer's rubber banding just gets out of control. As I've said before, I may not be qualified to give this game a real review, due to my lack of history with these type of games and lack of skill at them. But I consider my reviews to be mostly just a summary of my personal experience with the game. I claim no expertise, and make no pretense of objectivity. I'm just some guy, with a lot of thoughts banging around in my head, and a world wide web with which to spit them into. That's one of the reasons why I never assign a game a score. So what else is there to talk about? The epic boss fights seem to be the main selling point of any Souls game, but I didn't enjoy them nearly as much as I did just making my way through the main parts of the levels. I found all of the bosses that I encountered to either be extremely easy or impossibly difficult, with no in-between. I honestly thought that the levels prior to the boss fights were pretty relaxing to play. I know that might sound insane, but I'm serious. I think it was the repetition. The only one I didn't like at all was Valley of Defilement. An endless amount of bottomless pits in a non-platformer is bound to piss me off, and quickly. It's also interesting to note that at one point this game had online multiplayer elements worked into the single-player campaign, though the servers have since been shut down. I'm not going to get into how that worked since I've never personally experienced it, but that is probably why there's no pause button. Yeah, you heard that right. You cannot pause this game. I really don't understand why there isn't a pause button in offline mode, which is now, of course, the only mode. I do get not letting you switch weapons and mess about with your inventory while paused. That adds to the challenge and realism. But like, no pausing at all? Are you for real? Demon's Souls, of course, ended up being a sleeper hit and cult classic. It received a spiritual successor, Dark Souls, which was an absolute smash, and spawned a juggernaut franchise and a slew of imitators. I was very late to the party on this series, and the whole niche that it inspired. This was actually my very first time playing a Souls game, and I'm honestly surprised with how much fun I had, even though I couldn't be bothered to actually complete it. Despite it not being my wheelhouse in terms of genre, and that games that look like this usually don't appeal to me, it's possible to create dark atmospheres without exclusively using washed out shades of gray and brown. I shouldn't have to turn the brightness all the way up just to see where I'm going. Its trailblazing combat system really won me over. Oh, and the ragdoll physics are hilarious. These guys are much less intimidating than they were just a few short moments prior. This won't be the last Souls game I play. If you enjoyed the video, please consider sharing, leaving a like, subscribing, and ringing the bell so you don't miss any future videos. This has been a Leaky Faucet review. See ya next time.